Alright, let's dive into something that's been bubbling under the surface of the media world but could have massive implications for how we consume local news. The FCC just voted to lift the cap on broadcast station ownership, and personally, I think this is one of those decisions that sounds technical but could fundamentally change the media landscape. Here's the deal. The FCC removed a rule that prevented companies from owning local TV stations reaching more than 39% of U.S. households. On the surface, it's a regulatory tweak, but what makes this really interesting is the why behind it and who stands to benefit, or lose. First, let's talk about the argument from FCC Chairman Brendan Carr. He claims this move will level the playing field between national networks and station owners, and in his words, it'll spur investment in local news. Personally, I'm skeptical. I mean, if you take a step back and think about it, local news has been struggling for years, partly because of consolidation. Bigger companies buying up smaller stations often leads to cost-cutting, shared content, and less hyperlocal coverage. So, the idea that removing this cap will magically fix local news feels a bit like wishful thinking. What this really suggests is that the FCC is betting on scale as the solution, but history doesn't exactly back that up. Now, let's talk about the players pushing for this change. Companies like Sinclair and Nexstar have been lobbying hard for this. Nexstar, for instance, just tried to merge with Tegna in a $6.2 billion deal that would give them a reach of about 80% of the country. That deal's on hold because of an antitrust lawsuit, but this FCC decision could pave the way for similar mega-mergers. What many people don't realize is that these big station groups aren't just local broadcasters, they're national companies that increasingly dictate what airs on local stations. So, when Carr says this will restore a healthy counterbalance, I can't help but wonder, counterbalance to what? Big tech? Or just more consolidation of power in fewer hands? Ana Gomez, the lone Democrat on the FCC, voted against this, and her dissent is worth paying attention to. She argues that trading a squeeze from big tech for a squeeze from big media doesn't actually protect the communities this cap was designed to serve. And honestly, she's got a point. If you look at what happened to local newspapers after consolidation, it's not a pretty picture. Layoffs, reduced coverage, and a loss of trust. If we're not careful, local TV could follow the same path. One thing that immediately stands out is how this decision seems to prioritize corporate interests over public service, which is supposed to be the whole point of broadcast media. Now, the National Association of Broadcasters is cheering this decision, calling it a generational step toward strengthening local stations. But here's the thing, strengthening how? By making them bigger targets for acquisition? By allowing them to cut costs and share content across markets? From my perspective, this feels less about strengthening local news and more about survival in a media landscape dominated by streaming and digital platforms. And while I get the pressure they're under, I'm not convinced this is the solution. What's also fascinating is how networks like Disney, Fox, and Paramount are positioning themselves. They've been arguing that their own stations should be treated the same as others, claiming they face the same competitive pressures from big tech. But if you take a step back, it's clear they're just trying to expand their footprints too. This raises a deeper question: are we moving toward a future where a handful of companies control both national and local media? And if so, what does that mean for diversity of voices and perspectives? Here's where I land on this: the FCC's decision isn't just about numbers or percentages, it's about power. Who gets to decide what stories get told, and who gets to tell them? Personally, I think we're at a crossroads. If this leads to more consolidation, we could see local news become even more homogenized, with less focus on the communities it's supposed to serve. But if it somehow manages to reinvigorate local journalism, well, that would be a welcome surprise. What makes this moment so critical is that it's not just about TV stations, it's about the future of local information itself. And that's something worth fighting for, no matter where you stand on this decision.